Support for Amplified Voices comes from the Restorative Action Foundation. Learn more at restorativeactionalliance.org.
Everyone has a voice, a story to tell. Some are marginalized and muted. What if there were a way to amplify those stories? To have conversations with real people in real communities? A way to help them step into the power of their lived experience. Welcome to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. Together, we can create positive change for everyone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Amplified Voices. I'm your host, Jason, here with my co-host, Amber. Good morning, Amber.
Good morning, Jason.
Amber, today we have with us Kevin Scott. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on. Kevin, tell us a little bit about your life before the criminal legal system and what brought you into it.
Okay, holy shit, here we go. I cuss a lot, by the way. I should probably lead with
That's
that.
okay. We're raw here on Amplified
Okay,
Voices.
thank fucking God. Okay, here we go. I'm in Florida. I live in Gainesville, Florida.
Where is that relative to Orlando or Miami?
We are north central Florida, north of Orlando, right in the middle of the state. They call it the swamp. The University of Florida is here. Gainesville, it's Alachua County, Gainesville, Florida.
Did you grow up there?
No, I was born in DC, but my family moved to Florida when I was like too young to remember, basically. Gainesville is definitely where I consider to be my home.
So I do have to say, I will forgive you because we are an FSU family.
Well, prepare for some good news then. Next week, my daughter and I will be going to FSU for orientation because she is about to start FSU next month.
All right. We're friends again.
So I grew up in Florida, definitely a challenging childhood. Addiction is a huge part of my story, a huge part of my family's story as well. My mom, especially when I was little, was an active addiction. And I have a brother who's 3 years older than I. Definitely had a lot of trauma based on my mom's addiction. So ended up meeting with every kind of abuse. There was physical, mental, emotional, sexual, psychological. I mean, this is, pretty standard for someone who's experiencing addiction. It was pretty bad for a while there. So that my mom was in that cycle at the time. My dad was relatively more stable, had like job. There was drinking and things around, but he was definitely at least functional.
Were they together or were you in separate homes?
Separate homes. I don't have any memory of them ever being together. I think shortly after we moved to Florida, they ended up splitting up, which was a catalyst for my mom's addictions kicking into gear there.
So you're going from stability to instability to stability to instability.
Yeah, and it was pretty bad. Yeah. So at some point, my mom's addiction had gotten so bad that she was denied parental rights. They were like, you're not sound, you're not safe to be around your children. And then in this real amazing event, she kidnapped us rather violently. My dad had remarried and my mom appeared out of nowhere. We hadn't seen her for months. Actually, we weren't even sure she was alive, my brother and I. And she basically just ambushed us as we were coming home from a grocery store and kidnapped me and my brother. She fled. We went to Miami for a while. We went to Puerto Rico. We went to Jamaica. It's like a fucking movie. It was crazy.
How old were you?
I must have been like 4 or something. I mean, I was little, like a little guy. The event was sudden. It was violent. It was very bloody. It was loud. It was terrifying. Yeah, it was intense. She was being abused by her boyfriend. So we witnessed all these terrible things. And she had consequences from her choices there as well. Ended up really getting it together later in life. We were very close. Before her final years, we were like extremely close, actually. And I have been less close with my dad's side of the family. Oddly enough, I kind of related more with my mom. We were closer than I was with my dad. Probably most kids who grew up in environments like that, there's some element of, oh my God, I will never do any of these things. Of course. Look what I have witnessed. How could anyone possibly, you know what I mean? Like, I'll never use these drugs. And then, of course, as special as I would like to consider myself to be, I am pretty textbook in the sense that by the time I got into like middle school, I had already started to experiment with substances. And it didn't take long before whatever is inside of me that is predisposed, eager for substances, was like, oh my God, like this is fantastic. And so I had consequences from using. By the time I was in 10th grade, I got sent to this juvie rehab place. It didn't take long for things to get sideways
And
for
you
me
said
there.
you had a sibling. Was is that a brother or sister?
Yeah, I have a an older brother who's 3 years older than me. I had a younger brother, but he passed away when he was
Oh, sorry.
14. Yeah, when I was 23, he was 14. He passed away. My older brother seemed to have dodged all of the bullets of addiction and all of the compounding, cascading joys that come from active addiction. I got blessed.
So, Kevin, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. I think one of the things that we see when we chat with people is the way that the stories unfold feels very nonchalant. It's like,
Mm.
oh, well, I was kidnapped and this thing happened. So I just want to acknowledge that was a lot of things, right? And a lot of trauma that you just described. So I want to acknowledge it and say that I'm sorry that that's something that you experienced. And then one thing that just struck me when you just spoke about your brother is that he dodged the bullet and your reaction was different. I think this is something really important for people to hear, right? Because people say something bad happened to me and I didn't do XYZ, whatever. I didn't get caught up in the system. I didn't react in that way. And it really shows the raw humanity of what we can look at, like what are interventions. And so my question to you is, along the way, when you were in school or you were interacting with other sorts of people in community, were there any opportunities for intervention? Did people notice what was happening?
Yeah, in ninth and 10th grade, especially for me, is when it started to become a little more apparent that I was using or something was going on. It was like March of my 10th grade year. The school contacted my parents separately and was like, your son has missed more days than he's been to school this year. And they were like, what the fuck? They did not know. I would leave the house in the morning and I was just going and partying and doing whatever. It became obvious that something was going on with me. And shortly thereafter, I ended up in like that juvie rehab place. And that was kind of my first exposure in terms of interventions. It wasn't 12 steps. They had somehow compressed it to 7 to make it more digestible for our teen minds or something like that. But it was 7 steps. I was in there for, on some level, for a year and a half. And it was full time, inpatient. And then by degrees over time, it's like, okay, you will go spend the night at your house. And then eventually you can now go back to high school. You sort of regained freedoms in the world. And that was really my first exposure to recovery-based stuff. And I was mandated as part of that to go to like X number of AA meetings or NA meetings. This was in Sarasota. And I was 15 years old and going to an AA meeting in Sarasota, Florida, where everyone was decades older than me. And it was
Right.
like I lost my wife, I lost my car, I lost my house. And I was like, I don't relate to any of that. Like I'm just a kid, you know what I mean? And so I felt like a little like I didn't belong there or something, but also there was some part of me that was like, oh, I very much do belong here. There's something familiar in what these people are sharing about how they interact with substances, about what it does to them mentally, kind of why they have chosen to do substances, and I could see myself in a lot of those stories. That was the main intervention for decades after, went in and out of recovery spaces until eventually, ironically, it was like, oh man, I lost my car, I lost my wife, lost my house. Like I ended up being exactly like what those people were talking about when I was a teen.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that for me, when I am thinking about that, it tells us that when we talk about interventions, right, um, it has to be culturally appropriate, it has to be age appropriate, all of those things. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Right. And Amber, I'm also thinking about the fact that, I mean, what your whole family was experiencing, and then eventually, just the trauma that your family went through. And I'm just thinking of your older brother right now, also lost a younger brother who saw all the same stuff and then had to see what you were going through. I wonder what his experience was like, through all of that. Must have been
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, during that period when I was in it was called the Life program, which stood for Life is for Everyone. In hindsight, it was really traumatic, honestly. And there's like support groups for people who
Yeah.
went through it. It was like really
Mm.
intense. It was not cool. But yeah, at the time, for sure, I think you're right, Jason. Like I felt a lot of shame and like, oh my God, I am like absolutely the black sheep of this family. Like my mom at that point had gotten clean, so she was in a better space. My younger brother at the time was like 5 or 6. And my older brother just, again, like did not have any of the same reactions or experiences of addiction. So just, sort of like eye rolling, like, oh my God, like this younger brother of mine is a mess. So I felt like profoundly like a burden, like shame, guilt, like an outcast in my family. Really, the person I identified most with in my family was my mom. I think just based on our sort of shared experience, and we had like similar dispositions and like interests. Like I don't know what I look like. I feel like I look like some like retired soccer hooligan or something. But like I'm actually like a super like soft, sweet guy. Like I'm like I cry all the time and I'm like a really sensitive guy. And my mom was like kind of the same way. Like she had like a really just like kind heart. So we had like a lot of resonance with each other. So outside of her, for the rest of my family, I didn't really like get along great with anybody. I always felt like I was a little like less than or outcast, and that carried through into my adult life. Like we just had no relationship outside of my mom, and that was pretty much it. Yeah.
So you go through your teen years and then your early adult years, and you're trying to get it. It sounds like you went through periods of trying to control this addiction and then having it control you. And you also alluded to the fact that at some point you got married and you were doing okay. Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I've been married a few times, man.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, so after high school, like I was pretty good at playing music also. So I got really into the music scene. So I was in like punk bands and hardcore bands, and like that was like a huge part of my life. That was why I moved to Gainesville. Gainesville had a huge music scene at the time. I had, friends I was able to plug in and ended up doing like touring, playing drums or working for other bands. So that was a huge part of my life. And then also like, I really wanted to stabilize. And so I would kind of go in and out of like these periods of sobriety, not using, and then I'd like relapse. It was very textbook, like in and out, in and out. In my heart of hearts, like I always wanted to be clean. I always felt like I was meant to be clean. The people that I revered most were oftentimes they were like musicians, but there was like people that were in like straight edge hardcore bands, people that were like talking about the value of a clear mind and having like a purposeful life. And I always felt like so like, yeah, like that sounds right to me, and just like vexed with myself because I couldn't get there. And like, sort of like this compounding, like, oh fuck, I can't do it. I can't do it. These guys are doing it. This lady's doing it. Why can't I do it? Like that's who I wanted to be. And so yeah, I went in and out of these like periods of stability. I got married a couple times, and then honestly, the thing that really kept coming back up was my addiction. There were times where like I was married, I had a daughter, and I ended up relapsing like a couple years after she was born, and things just like really. I had like a surgery on my back and I had been clean at the time, and they were like, well, you're going to need some like pain management medication. And I had done everything other than pills at that point. So that was not really on my radar. But then, like, almost like immediately reignited my addiction, and all these cascading things happened, which ended up leading to the end of my marriage at the time. Relapsing ended up like having legal consequences, and like all these things. I ended up going to prison. So yeah, I had these like attempts at stability and I just
Yeah.
could not make it stick.
I just want to pause there for a second. I want to underline and underscore you were in a period of high stress for anybody when you have a young family, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's very, very stressful to begin with. There were a lot of forces working against you at that point, that you need to kind of be forgiving too, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the perfect storm for somebody that has like a propensity for addiction. It was like, oh, what a great setup. It was like there was high stress. Here's drugs. Here's, it's like somebody like readily handing out drugs. And that just like really kicked in all the pre-existing stuff. And like, typically when somebody relapses, it tends to be worse than the last time they used. And that has definitely been true in my history as well. Like every time it was like a little worse than the last time. And it was like, God, it happened so fast too. I've been clean for over 12 and a half years now, I should say. So this has
All
been like,
right.
yeah, so this is like quite a ways in the rear view, at least from that
Right.
time. But yeah, it didn't take long. I ended up, it was like stealing stuff and just putting myself in like awful positions. And, like addiction shows up in many, many ways. So it didn't take long for the consequences to arrive.
So tell us a little bit about like what you mean by consequences. Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So like as my addiction, had sort of post surgery, the drugs were reintroduced. Behaviorally, things started just getting even more sideways. And I think like I knew I needed help. I was too ashamed to acknowledge that I needed help. It was really hard for me to say it out loud. At that time, I had a child. I didn't have a ton of support. I had moved back to Sarasota at the time. That's where my wife and we were living there during this period. I felt like pretty isolated and I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to ask for help or acknowledge like what was happening to say it out loud to anybody else. And so I think one of my friends said it really well. He's like, more than like drugs, I think I'm like addicted to self-destruction. Like I am addicted to oblivion. Like that's what I'm seeking and
Oh,
on some
geez.
level. And so I ended up, yeah, I was like stealing stuff and putting myself in all these like crazy situations. And I ended up getting incarcerated. I'd never been arrested before my entire life. Somehow I had like never had that, never been in handcuffs, never been in jail. And it was a jarring experience, obviously.
Can I add something where you said addicted to oblivion, really addicted to that? It sounds to me that you were in extreme distress. You didn't know how to physically ask for help, but you wanted out. And the only way to do that was to completely blow up your life. It's somehow in your brain, blowing up your life is going to get you help.
Yeah, that's it. It was like as opposed to finding like a softer, more reasonable way to get help,
Right.
I'm just going to eat a fucking grenade. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
exactly right. It was like on somewhere in my brain, it was like I just need the apocalypse as opposed to some sort of reasonable help. Yeah, so that I ended up getting arrested. I was out for like 2 years waiting for things to be resolved. I thought it was going to maybe go away, and then eventually I ended up getting sent to prison. I was sentenced for 4 years, and then there's the whole story of what happened inside. But yeah, I ended up going into the Florida Department of Corrections with a 4 year sentence.
Tell us a little bit about the sounds, feels, all of those things of what happened when, so people can sort of understand what is the experience of finding yourself in the world one moment and then
Mhm.
getting sentenced and then finding yourself behind the walls.
Yeah. I yeah, I did not think I was going to go to prison. I really thought I was going to leave the courtroom. I felt quite confident I was going to, and it turned out like absolutely not. They were like guilty, led away at that moment. The judge let me hug my family, which was, I think, unusual. And that was it. I mean, like you're immediately bodily taken away in that moment. Unbeknownst to me, I wasn't going to come out of there for, years to come at that point. But yeah, led away. I was in the county jail for I think about 3 months, something like that. Sort of waiting for like the sentencing and the transport before I was sent to like Florida prison. They put you in a van with like a bunch of other guys. You're shackled up together. And I ended up going to Orlando. There's like a central receiving facility. It's like a slaughterhouse, basically. It's like a processing for prisons. So I went there. It was freezing cold. I got there, it was February. And I think by the time we arrived to the place in Orlando, it was like probably 4 or 5 in the morning. But, you're kind of up all night, traumatized. They stripped us naked. It was freezing cold out there. Florida does get cold, by the way. We're naked, like spread them, cough, humiliating, all the things. They shave your head. It puts you in a shower that's 6 zillion degrees. And, they give you clothes, and it's a really dehumanizing thing. It's done in, you had better maintain silence or somebody's going to come stomp you. You know what I mean? It's like, it's super violent right off the bat. They're setting the tone. I went through that, and actually, they handed out food trays, and at the county jail, I had been starving. And when I opened up the tray, I thought it was a trick because it seemed to me like there was so much food on the tray. There wasn't, but that's just to speak to how scant the portions were in the county jail. I actually was like, wow, what an abundance of food on this prison tray because I was so damn hungry. So yeah, I was there in Orlando, I would say like maybe like a month, and then they sort of determine where you're gonna go, like what your permanent prison's going to be. One morning they, say, Scott, pack your shit, you're put on a bus with a bunch of other guys, and they make stops at different prisons, and they basically pull out a list like you get off at this one, and you go to another prison, you. And so that's how it went. I ended up going to a prison that's in Central Florida, south of here, but in the middle of the state, in the like Hardy County area, basically. The rest of my incarceration was there. It was not at all what I thought it was going to be like. It's not like the movies. It's not like what you would see on TV. It was quite the experience. I ended up meeting some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my entire life. Some of the most like creative, intelligent, warm, compassionate, just like, I mean, amazingly talented people that it's a disservice for these folks to be kept in the cage. Some of like the greatest people I've ever met were there. Because I was a musician. Actually, the first night I got there, there was like this like sort of one wing of this one dorm where like all of the new people came through. It's like the orientation wing. And the way that my cell was, there's no air conditioning in Florida prison, by the way, which you can imagine it gets super, super hot at times, but there's just like basically open windows. And I was like, do I hear music? Like I thought I heard like live instruments, like somewhere, like in the distance. And I asked somebody and they're like, oh yeah, like on the rec yard, there's like a band room out there. And I was like, oh my God, how do I get there? Like, how can I get there? And so like the first chance I got to go onto the rec yard, I went up to the officer who ran it and I was like, I've been in bands. Like if there's any way for me to plug in here, I'm like, holy shit, like this would be amazing. And he was like, actually the guy who has been doing it is about to leave. He's like, I'll make you the new guy. So like that's what I did for quite a while. My job at the prison was I was a rec orderly. So I worked on the rec yard, but I ran the band room. And
Whoa. Well,
yeah.
Amber, this is the first time we had somebody who was a musician on the inside.
Mhm.
This is great.
So just so you know, you're talking to several musicians as well. So we're really excited to hear about this.
When the two of you were talking sports, I checked out, but when you get into the music stuff, you wake me up. But no, that's before we get into some of the good stuff, which is what is exciting. You've described being in there because of the drugs, and which led to behaviors that got you incarcerated. Now, all of a sudden, you find yourself in the prison situation, and let's see, how do I say this? So there were no drugs in prison, right? That was never an issue.
Everybody laughs very loudly all of a sudden.
My God. There's so many drugs, and you're locked in with them. There's no getting away from them. Yeah, you're literally locked in with all the drugs. Yeah.
And obviously, it was definitely the family members that brought them in. Is that right? Is that right?
Incorrect,
I mean, that's
Amber.
what the media told me.
Certainly. Yeah, that is definitely
It wasn't the corrections officers exploiting people with addiction.
So how did you handle that?
Yeah. For people who relapse a lot, it's not always linear. Recovery is not always linear. It's not always like you get clean one time and you got it. I went in and out as many times as I needed to go in and out. And I guess at that last time, I was just done. And so I just made this commitment. I'm going to do whatever I can to stay clean. And I don't think it's because I'm like an extraordinary human being. It was just I was done at that time. And some people, it's their first time. Some people, it's their thousandth time. So I never give up on anybody who's dealing with addiction, going in and out. To your point, the staff definitely smuggling in substances. It's drugs, alcohol, tobacco, pornography, all kinds of stuff. I mean, the staff is who's bringing that stuff in. So yeah, for sure, saw a guard come in, deliver drugs to a prisoner, and they've received their payment, and then come back later and bust that same prisoner for the drugs that they brought in, and then reclaim the drugs and then go sell them to somebody else. I mean, it's a sinister thing. They're keeping people sick. 100%. It is not a healing environment, despite whatever they might publicly proclaim. That is the opposite of what's actually happening in there, for sure, for sure.
So, Kevin, I have to say that what you just said is what most people that I know who have had a journey with addiction say.
Mm,
One day I was just tired.
mm,
I just decided it had to be me. Like it had to come from me. And you're exactly right. It's the millionth time, it's the second time, it's whenever the person comes to the point where they're like, this is not what I want my life to be.
mm.
Having said that, that takes a lot, right? So a person who can't do that that time, I love that you said I never give up on someone
Never.
because
Yeah.
there will be a time where someone can get to that point.
Mhm.
Nobody should ever be left without help. So
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
sharing
Yeah, I mean, things just don't fit into a neat little package all the time. I mean, like my mom, like people would have given up on her many times. I mean, she fucking kidnapped her own children. You know what I mean? Like, there's a strong case for like, oh my God, what a horrible human being this is. And that was just simply not true. Like, it just took her a few times, and she got clean, and she was amazing. By the time she died, she was like world's sweetest grandma. Like there was no trace of like people would be in disbelief to hear that sweet Linda ever did anything other than be sweet Linda the grandma. You know what I mean? So I never give up on anybody. And there was like, in prison, at least where I was, there weren't resources. There really weren't like supports. There was like AA meetings. I think every now and again came in, but the system itself wasn't providing anything like meaningful in terms of like addiction supports or mental health support. I had always been sort of interested. I sort of like felt inspired by and called to be a person of like purpose. I always felt like drawn to people who did like meditation and had sort of like this like clear mind. And on the chapel list where I saw this thing that said Buddhist meditation. And I was like, oh wow, interesting. Like amazing that they had that here too. Like not only is there music, but there's meditation. I should say all of these things were supported by people on the outside. None of these things were created by the prison itself. So
that. Right.
that if I'm saying there were good things there, it's only because people on the outside took it upon themselves to provide these things. But anyway, I ended up going to this Buddhist meditation event at the chapel, and unbeknownst to me, it was sort of like a longer event. Usually, it was like an hour a week. This was going to be like multiple hours, and their sponsor from the outside was coming in to be present. And so I got in there, and there was a few people like civilians. I was like, oh wow, people not wearing uniforms, amazing. They rang the bell. There was like a little chanting and things. They rang the bell, and like meditation started. And within shit, it felt like a minute. I was like, oh my God, get me the fuck out of here. Like it was so silent. Peeked around, and everyone was just like sitting, looking, it was appearing to be like relatively still and silent. And I was like, oh my God, this is too much for me. I can't do this. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And I was like, okay, like I think I'm just gonna like get up and like walk out. And I was like, wait, I'm in prison. Can I just walk out of this room? Am I allowed to do that? But like, are they gonna tackle me? Like, what's gonna happen? And I was like, okay, well, I got to get out of this room. And then I had this moment of realizing, like, okay, let's say I get up and I go to this door and I open it and I get to the other side of this door. I was like, oh, I'm going to be on the other side of the thing I'm trying to get away from is going to be on the other side of that door also. And I was like, oh my God, like, where can I go that I am not? I sort of caught that thought and I realized, like, oh, Kevin, like, that is your whole life. Where can I go that I am not? And that was like this real profound moment for me of like, all I have been trying to do is oblivion, apocalypse, escape, be anywhere that this is not, like be anywhere that reality is not happening. And so for some reason, in that little reprieve of like stillness and silence, I caught the thought, I saw it. And I was like, oh my God, like, if not now, when?
You also had told us before we started recording that were some things that happened in prison that influenced your life now and what you're doing now. Is there anything that you want to share with us about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the people that I met along the way, like some of the guys that I ended up meditating with, and part of the reason I came home early is because one of the guys I became friends with through meditation was a law clerk. And he was like, how are you here? And he like looked through my stuff and he like ended up like filing these things on my behalf. I got released like a year early. And he actually got me 10 more months with my mom because she died like later the year that I came home. And I would have missed these like final 10 months of my mom's life. The people I met were so remarkable. I ended up meditating regularly. I ended up in this like deep formal study with this Zen priest on the outside. I was lucky. I was lucky. I had like good support and I was able to like change my perspective on myself.
I just have to comment that Amber is beaming. She loves the meditation stuff. She leads circles and meditations.
No, I was grinning very big because I'm a sound journey practitioner. I teach meditation. I teach mindful meditative art. And so I was like, oh, what? Meditation saved your life? Duh.
100%. And I should say, like, like I sort of the anecdote, like I hated it at first.
Right. Many people do.
So I've been doing it still even years later. We have a weekly meditation here that we offer for people who've been in prison here in our community. It's a huge part of my life. It ended up becoming like a central to my entire existence.
So you get out of prison early, you get to spend time with your mother. That's amazing and so fortunate. I mean, just a comment, the fact that you were in prison at all when what you needed was healing. You could have had those precious moments even before that, but it's great that you had some moments with her towards the end. And then, so I guess life is not forever. And then, so you have to appreciate what you have when you have it.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're out and you're doing some phenomenal things, right?
I'm really excited to hear about the work that you're doing now. But I want to just quickly, because when we talk about the harm of the system, a lot of times people say, oh, but the person did this, that, or the other. So I just want to, as we're talking about this story, I know the times that you spent in meditation, the times that you were in reflection about your life and how you were trying to get away. During that self-reflection process, were there thoughts in your mind about any harm that you had caused? How did that affect you? Let's talk a little bit about the accountability that comes with self-realization, self-reflection, that, to be clear, the prison didn't give you. The people that came in and you found it within yourself. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as you know, in meditation, you think about everything. It like as much as you might be like, I will have no thoughts in meditation. Yeah, fucking good luck with that.
Yeah, no, that's not how the human brain works.
Yeah, let me know how that goes. Yeah, so of course, everything. I mean, part of the power of meditation to me is that there is nowhere to hide. My teacher's called like it's the pressure cooker. And he would scream like, burn it up. He's a very enthusiastic man, which is great. But yeah, there is nowhere to hide. And so, of course, yes, all of the things like you become aware, you become at one with all of the things that you have done in your life. And for sure, I caused harm. I was selfish. I hurt people. I took things. I was dishonest. I mean, there's a litany of things that I could certainly point to and take accountability for sure. And I think that was important for me to have a real stark, unflinching look at myself and my life through the lens of accountability and also through the lens of like some compassion as well. I tend to be extraordinarily hard on myself, like many people in addiction or just people in the world. I tend to criticize myself. I demonize myself in a way that I would never to somebody else. I'm way more gracious with everyone else on the planet than myself. So there was a time for me to also practice some softening, some level of self-kindness has been like really important. It's still ongoing part of my training for sure is to extend that kindness to myself as well.
I really love the way that you put that because I think one of the things that we do, at least in our culture and in the United States, is we conflate punishment with accountability and how someone arrives at accountability. If you are in a state of constant shame, isolation, self-hatred, all of those things, there's no place for accountability, right? Because you're not extending yourself that self-compassion. So I love the way that you really articulated that process of extending that self-compassion. Because, I mean, we went from I was 4 and I was kidnapped and taken to Puerto Rico to a journey through addiction. So, like, looking at all things in aggregate, here you are still standing. That's amazing. So, with that, I think this is a great transition point to talk about what are you up to right now?
Shit, I don't know. No, I'm kidding. I thank you for saying that. It's really nice. I should say too that like the environment of the prison, I think this is probably true anywhere, maybe even magnified more so in Florida. It was not an environment that had any interest in my healing or like repairing myself or moving forward to be a productive member. I mean, despite the advertising. So like I was the band room guy. At some point, they put me into the cabinet making program. They're like, we're going to give this guy a vocation. So I went through the cabinet making program and I got a certificate of cabinet making. And then because I'm such an organized, eloquent fellow, they made me the cabinet making teacher's assistant. So I was the teacher's aide in the cabinet making department. That's how it like the
Otherwise
last
known as like exploited labor.
100%. And then also, no one ever taught me how to build a fucking cabinet. Like ever. I have this certificate that is utterly, I mean, it is useless. It's smoke and mirrors. No one was teaching me anything.
So I won't be calling you for my house renovation.
Please don't, unless you want a real shit cabinet. The teacher was the janitor. He would put his feet on the desk. He sold tobacco to the prisoners, which is, comical, sort of, but also when
But
I am
not.
released from prison, like now the onus is on me. I am expected to.
Go build a cabinet.
Right. So any failure to thrive is now like, oh, a reflection of my personal failure. We did everything we were supposed to do to give Kevin a shot. And it's just simply not true. So that was jarring for me. And then when I came home from prison, I had been clean for several years at this point. I had played music. I gave music lessons. I had been meditating. I felt like really on fire to be a source of good in the world. I couldn't wait to get home to my community and just sort of like expose that what had been happening, somewhat like illuminate the realities of incarceration, and also just to like get involved in some good things. And it was way challenging.
And so when you came in, the community said, this guy's been clean. We embrace you. Everything's great. The opportunities were at your door. The world was your oyster and things were fantastic, right?
You had no problem getting any like picture ID. None of those things happened, right?
Jesus, I was on fire and it was a bucket of water over my head almost immediately. It was so jarring. So my mom was still alive at the time. I remember like we like went to like a Starbucks. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a coffee, like a delicious drink. And I told the person behind the counter, I just got out of prison. My mom was like, you got to stop saying that to people. I was so excited. She was like, this is not landing the way you think this is landing. I was so enthusiastic.
Well, listen, if I was working at the Starbucks or I was a customer at that Starbucks and you said I just got out of prison, I would give you a high five and say, welcome home. So you never know who you're going to encounter in these places.
Correct. I wish you had been in that Starbucks. That would have helped. To your point, like, it was really hard, like getting an ID, getting stability. It was hard to like find a place to live. I slept in the parking lot of a homeless shelter for a while. Our local homeless shelter here in Gainesville, Florida, is called Grace Marketplace, and it used to be Gainesville Correctional Institution.
Oh,
It's an old prison that's been retrofitted into a homeless shelter. So yeah, Grace Marketplace, the homeless shelter, it is an amazing organization. They've helped, I don't even know how many, like thousands of people now. They've reduced homelessness here, but undeniably, it is an old prison. So anyone who's come out of incarceration, if you show up there, you're like, oh my God, like the last thing I can bring myself to do is, go from prison to prison. So I was like, I can't go in there. I can't go in there. So I slept in the parking lot. I ended up working there years later. Oddly enough, I ended up going back there and working as an advocate and as a guest ambassador. I worked there for like 2.5 years or something like that. Amazing organization. But that's how I came home, was like, you've gone through this incarceration. Congratulations. Now you're homeless. Congratulations. Now it's going to be hard for you to find a job. I was on probation. I had this like long list of like debt as well. So there's like probation fees. If you have to do like any sort of like drug testing, some people have like ankle monitors, polygraphs, anger management classes. There's like a long list depending on your situation of what you have to pay for. under threat of reincarceration. So I wasn't like back on a level playing field. I came out into a deep, deep hole, and it was terrifying. Like there were tears of joy. I'm home when I finally hugged my daughter again, when the ocean touched my body. I mean, like, bawling, beautiful moments. And then also
You had Starbucks.
fucking
I
Starbucks.
mean, arguably, I'm not a Starbucks fan, but I could see where that could be exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting. I was like, ooh, a chai tea, a dirty chai. How I've fantasized about you for these long years.
What year did you get out?
So this is the beginning of 2016 is when I came home.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good.
So there was tears of joy, all these things, but then also like just sheer terror because probation is like, if you don't check these boxes and start producing money as if by magic, the solution will be to reincarcerate you. So in our county here, yeah, 23%, like a quarter of probation violations due to a lack of money. Not a new crime, not
Wow.
an offense. The crime is your bank account. You are just too poor to be free. And so the solution is to reincarcerate you and put you back into the environment that can only exacerbate that problem the next time if you're lucky enough to come home. So that was my reality. I eventually, really through sheer mercy, not because of my like extraordinary drive or ambition. Everyone has drive and ambition. Mercy. Somebody gave me a job. Somebody I know gave me a job at a restaurant, which is not what I like wanted to do in my heart of hearts, but it was like, I will take anything. I was so desperate. And so I was like, I'm going to be the best goddamn employee this restaurant has ever seen. So I was. And so like I
Excellent.
eventually like took on this like management role there shortly after. So that was like a stabilizing thing. And that was important for me to have that stability. It gave me like a little bit of income, and which was missing. And it removed the
Yeah.
threats of reincarceration, at least for money for a while.
Some restaurants are known for their culture of uh, having drugs around and things like that. Was that an issue for at this restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like every restaurant. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean that is a very common thing, and there are not everybody, but there are some folks that were there that were definitely like using. That was a reality. I was around that, and at the time, I was not only was I totally sober, but I was like also militant vegan at the time as well. So like the owners of this restaurant were like, "Oh my God, like you're like a unicorn, like you're vegan straight edge guy." So I was definitely a loner in that regard in the restaurant. It was fine. Actually, being around that stuff was no problem. I mean, in prison, I was around that stuff all the time, so it was no big
Yeah,
deal.
good.
Yeah.
So I love one of the things that you said. So I want to just sort of repeat it or highlight it or lift it up a little more. You said I was going to be the best damn employee that this restaurant ever had.
Yeah.
So I want to highlight this because here's what happens. People say, oh, this person can't possibly be reliable. They just got out of prison. This,
Mm.
like I can't trust them. And there's all this stigma around people who are formerly incarcerated. And my experience has been that the most reliable, determined people with the most grit that are going to be amazing employees. I hate to say it like this, but the truth of the matter is when you have so much to lose, right? You are really going to do your best to keep yourself in a stabilized situation. And that tends to go a couple of different ways. That goes, oh, I recognize this as a business owner and I lift you up. Or it goes, oh, I recognize this as a business owner. I'm going to exploit that desperation.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yep, I have seen all of that. My experience was the first example where the guys were like they were super supportive, really great guys.
Nice.
I mean, honestly, those guys saved my life. Like in with
Yeah.
no exaggeration. Those guys absolutely like they saved me. I love them dearly still. I
Mm.
support their restaurant. They're great. Anyway, but yeah, for sure, there are some like companies even here locally where like that is sort of their business model is exploiting people who are in a fragile, vulnerable place. Oftentimes, many who are formerly incarcerated, where exactly like you're saying, we got you by the balls. We know that you need this job. We know that you need this money. And so we're going to subject you to long hours or backbreaking work. It's like from the slammer to the hammer, they say, like you have been released, and now for the rest of your life, you will be relegated to hard labor for low wages. Every sentence is a life sentence. You will be exploited until the end of your days. You are now only good for backbreaking work, whatever it may be. And yeah, and to your point, oftentimes they take advantage of that and people aren't fairly compensated. There's a ceiling for their advancement, all of the things. Actually, I'll be excited when we'll get there, but we can talk about some of the great outcomes that we've seen with jobs through our work here has actually been like really transformative as well. I worked at the restaurant for several years and it was like, okay, I was like stabilizing. My mental health is the last thing that people take care of when they come home. And that came back to haunt me after like a couple of years, definitely feeling like depression, anxiety, like some suicidal ideations, even just like, God, I felt so ate up. Before I left prison, I knew I was going back to court. I was like, I'm going to go home. Like I knew it was coming. And I went to the mental health worker at the prison and I was like, hey, I'm having these like challenging feelings. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling agitated. I'm scared. And the mental health professional at the prison told me, "Oh, you got to stuff all that." Like, oh,
I'm sorry,
like
what? Can you
exactly.
repeat that?
It's like you got to stuff all that. He told me to stuff it, and I knew enough from like my past history in recovery spaces and in just like the world of obvious mental health that like the advice to stuff it can't possibly be the thing. So I carried that home, and so after a couple of years, I felt really ate up. I eventually went to our local crisis center here, ended up being just by, coincidence paired with a fabulous therapist, really helped me a lot. This poor person, I would go into her office twice a week and just bawl my eyes out. And then I went once a week, and then I went every other week, and then I went once a month. And I just had to have like a space to like process like the atrocities that I had experienced and
Mm,
witnessed in prison. I skipped over like a thousand horrible things that I saw while I was in prison, the way they treated people and just awful things that happened while I was inside. That was haunting me. Finally, kind of started to make some headway there, feeling better. And I was like, this is great. I am stable. I am home. I have this job. But I felt like that drive, like that purpose was missing from my life. And so I was like, I really want to do something. I had been doing some like advocacy work through some pro-prisoner groups, but I had shared my experience here and there and was sort of cutting my teeth a little bit in the world of activism and advocacy. And then just by chance, somebody I know was like, hey, have you heard about there's this thing called Community Spring that's starting up, and they're looking for people who've experienced poverty before to do like a 5-month fellowship. I was like, I'm not really sure what these words mean. I don't know what I don't know what you're talking about. But so I was like, that sounds like interesting. So I looked through this like application and it was like, what communities do you identify with? Can you talk about your experience with poverty? And I was eager to do something. So I applied. I interviewed with these people. It was like this Lindsay and Max, these people they were from Gainesville and they'd been working in DC for years. I had just come back to Gainesville. They wanted to do some work in the South and they were about economic justice. Anyway, I went through the interview process and I was one of 5 people that was selected to be a fellow for this little 5-month experiment just to see like, is it a good idea? The idea being that people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. And so wanting to prioritize.
So you just quoted Glenn Martin. We have to give him credit.
Okay.
And in terms of what you're doing, what year is this?
It started in January of 2020, so 5 years ago, a little bit over 5 years ago.
Wait,
right when COVID was becoming into the world. Remember that?
I recall. Yeah. So we started in January
In Florida.
2020.
Yikes.
In Florida. Perfect. What could go wrong? Yeah, so we started in January 2020, and the idea was just like, okay, like what could we do here locally to address poverty? And it was like, based on your experience, kind of like, what do you think? Like this is going to be a bit of like a think tank. You are the experts. People who have experienced poverty are the ones best equipped to address poverty, come up with genius solutions to poverty. And so by utter coincidence, the 5 of us had what kept coming up was the justice system has impacted our lives either directly or indirectly. Some of us had been incarcerated. Some of us, it was like a family member. And we're like, what we see here in our county, in our community, is there is zero, 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 zero reentry supports. There is nothing. There's the probation office, which feels like the antithesis of support.
Right. I was like, that doesn't count.
Yeah, that's not it. And then if you looked up reentry support, anything, you could maybe there's a phone number, and if you called it, it rang at the library. Some good-hearted person that worked at the public library had basically set up like a line, and they would do what they could to offer some support, basically. So like, wouldn't it be amazing if, sort of similar to like AA, like that lived experience, what if there was like a peer support type thing for people who'd been incarcerated? Wouldn't that be amazing? And so we were like, okay, so we started like kind of building out the structure for that. And then we're like, well, wouldn't it be great if while you're still inside, you got some information about how to navigate coming home, like what to expect and like some resources, because I came home, I'm in the fucking parking lot of the homeless shelter. Like, there's like, it's like a mystery of like what to do and how to do it. So we put together like a resource guide, like a trifold. And then we got a list of everyone who was coming home to our county within the next, X number of months. And we mailed all of them these resources while they were still inside. And then we were doing like meetings when people were coming home. We're like having like peer support meetings. To your point earlier, COVID arrived. And so we were like, oh shit, like we had to stop getting together. It threw a huge monkey wrench into everything. But we had built this momentum and we wanted to still do something. And we had heard about the power of like direct cash assistance for different populations. We're like, yeah, let's do that. Whether, even though it's not going to be related to incarceration, anyone who is receiving food stamps, SNAP benefits, could basically put their name in a hat, as much money as we could every month, just through the community. And we were giving out $300 checks. So basically we did like a lottery draw every month. And it was like, okay, great. Like we could help 20 people this month. And so they would go hand deliver $300 checks. And it was like really powerful for people. It was like the community raised this money. The community is delivering this money. It was really like really grassrootsy direct cash assistance. And $300 is not obviously a life-changing amount of money. But if you can kind of put yourself back in the space of like the summer of 2020, it was like toilet paper is, $300 felt like, $1 zillion.
Also, $300 is the difference between paying a probation fee and not going back to prison, or, your car being repossessed. It's not a lot of money, but when you're living in poverty, yes, it is.
Means a lot. Yeah, for sure. It was a big deal. And so that got the attention of our mayor at the time, who had, just by coincidence, he had just joined this coalition called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, which is just a group of mayors from around the country that think guaranteed income is just a good policy idea. It's just a good practice. And so he reached out to Community Spring and was like, hey, would you be interested in running a guaranteed income pilot? If so, we'd have a little bit of seed funding to get it off the ground. And so like everything, we had a lot of discussions of like us, the impacted people, like, could we do this? Should we do this? This is like a brand new organization. Anyway, we came back and we're like, it would be cool to do this. But what if it was for formerly incarcerated people based on our previous work already? Like, wouldn't this be an amazing synergy of reentry support and direct cash assistance? And they're like, yeah, okay, let's do that. And so that sort of planted the seed for what is now our program, which is called Just Income. And we're now in our third year of doing that. We're our third cohort of people. We've had 157 recipients. We've given out over $1 million to people here in Alachua County, Florida. And so that ended up becoming my job here. I was initially like the program manager, helping to get the program off the ground. And I'm now my title now is Director of Guaranteed Income here at Community Spring.
Somebody comes out of prison and they somehow get connected to your program, and now they apply and they get a check regularly?
Yeah, so the way we do it now, so similar to our previous direct cash assistance, we raise as much money as we can. And that tells us we do like an annual lottery draw. And so the current iteration, and we've made changes. So again, we rely on the genius of people who've been through it. So every year we've refined our work. We've asked our recipients, how can we make this better? So to say that the current criteria is if you've been released within the last year, you can put your name in the hat, and you get $800 a month for 12 months. So you get a full year of, it's $9,600 over the course of a year. So obviously that is not like enough to totally live on, but it provides a cushion, some breathing room, some stability. It used to be like a monthly payment. Now we're based on feedback. The first and the 15th of every month is 400, 400, 400, 400, with the idea
Mm.
being that it'll increase stability financially, mentally, all the things. So the first year we did it, we were studied by the University of Pennsylvania and the Center for Guaranteed Income Research. They did a mixed methods, randomized control trial. So it's not just some ding-dangs in Florida telling you this is a good idea.
There are a lot of smart people in Florida too, just to be
Correct.
fair.
Correct, for sure. But we want this to hold like the academic scrutiny. We want this to be like a
Of
robust
course.
study that people can point to for decades to come. And so we're like really happy and stoked. And so just earlier, just a few months ago, we released the full academic results of our pilot year. And the results were astounding. So like that year that is in question, that is being released now, the research results, all that we did, all that we did, the only thing in this county that was happening is we gave people money and we were nice to them. Period. It was money and kindness. There's still no other existing reentry supports. There was still no other like, there was no reentry center. Since then, we have passed a fair chance hiring ordinance. Phone calls are free from the jail. We've wiped out 15, 16 jail and court fees. And now there is a reentry center staffed by formerly incarcerated people.
Wow.
So we've changed the ecosystem locally, but the year in question, all we did was money and kindness. It reduced recidivism by 31%. It cut money-related probation violations like nearly in half. Food insecurity went away. Mental health skyrocketed. And jobs, oh my God, it did not lead to some sort of rash of unemployment or laziness. In fact, people that got the money stabilized and improved their jobs. We knocked it out of the park. And it just goes to show that what people really need is not compliance, control, surveillance. What people need is resources. People need some support and just be treated and recognized as you are right in this moment.
So first of all, congratulations. Wow, what an amazing story. You validated Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you did
That's it.
that. That
That's
was
right.
great. And it's interesting because, like you said, typically put people in this situation where you say, you better go get a job or else you're going to be reincarcerated. And we're not going to give you any type of support. Go figure it out. And you've got this label on you. You have no stability and you're worried about how am I going to have a roof over my head? Where am I going to get food? And what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And so what you did was sounds like you took some of that initial pain out of the way so that people could focus on recovery, reintegration, working things out. And they don't need a probation officer standing over them saying, do you have a job yet? You have a job yet? You have a job yet? When they're trying to figure out where their next meal's coming from.
Yep. We didn't ask anyone to prove they were ready to get this money or to like demonstrate their worthiness. Everyone is worthy of support as they are right now. That's true 24 hours a day. And the money is truly, truly, truly no strings attached. People can use it for anything they wish. There's no conditions on it. Oftentimes, support comes with this paternalistic nature of like, you
Yeah.
must use this for utilities, or you got to take a financial literacy class. It's like, I'm not stupid. I'm not poor because I'm stupid. I'm poor because I don't have any money. People
Yeah.
who have experienced poverty are actually quite
Right.
good with money. And we saw people leverage the income for amazing things. Like to your point earlier about exploitative employers,
Right.
Jada, she had a job. She was at a motel cleaning. Her employer knew she was on probation and weaponized that against her all the time. And was like, here's horrible hours, horrible pay. And she was stuck because
Yeah.
there's no buffer. And so he would threaten to call her probation officer if she didn't like
Mm-mm.
acquiesce to his extraordinary demands. And so when she got this money, she was like, kiss my ass. I
She
quit.
was like, bye.
Yeah.
My human value is worth more than this situation. Kevin, I love that you said all we gave them was money and kindness. And for those that can't
Mhm.
see me, I'm cupping my hands. And kind, like the part about kindness and being treated like an actual human being in a
Mm,
world that places so many barriers in front of you cannot be
Yeah.
understated. Would you agree with that?
100%. A lot of folks have reported that the money was great. It afforded me some material fill in the blank, whatever that was. However, the fact that I was like trusted and just seen as a person and treated with like full humanity And like, I mean, people come in, like, we call them by their names. We like,
Shocking.
we hug it out. Whatever, like we treat people like,
That's good.
like we would want to be treated. And people say like that actually, in some ways, has had more of a lasting effect than even like the money itself. Like that was a vital component. It wasn't just the money.
It helps people tear down some of the internalized messages
Mm,
about who they are when there is someone external saying, I see you, you are a human,
mm,
because it can't be really explained except for those who have experienced the labeling and the surveillance and the incarceration and the trauma and all of those things, what that does to yourself as a person and how you
mm.
think about yourself. Am I characterizing that correctly?
That's right. Yeah, when everything is telling you what a piece of shit you are, at some
Yeah.
point you start to think, "Oh, I'm a piece of shit." I mean, yeah, you internalize all of those things. You begin to, I mean, your view of yourself changes, and that's sort of reinforced by what you're seeing in the culture and everything around you. One of my favorite stories, like I said, I ended up working at the homeless shelter years after I had slept in this parking lot. One of the greatest experiences of my life. It was fantastic working with folks in there and just like getting to know people. Really informative for me as just a human being. But there was somebody there. Her name was V, and she had been incarcerated. She was like a profound domestic abuse victim, like actively at that time, even her partner at the time. It was really bad. She was eligible to get the guaranteed income, and it's a lottery draw, but she put her name in there. She was eligible. She met the criteria, and she got selected. And so from the outside looking in, they could be like, oh, well, this is a person. She's living at a homeless shelter. She has substance use stuff going on. What a waste. And she proved everybody wrong. V
Excellent.
used the money. She got away from her abuser. She was able to extricate herself from an abusive relationship because she had the resources to
Yep.
escape. She got into stable housing. She addressed her addiction. She reconnected with her children and got certified for work. And even years, so her guaranteed income ended 2.5 years ago. She's still clean to this day. All she needed was someone to just like believe in her. She has like the best quote. I use it all the time. She said, "Hope goes a long way for people who are accustomed to hopelessness." Like,
Hmm.
just believe in me for 1 second. Like, you'd be amazed at what it means.
I mean, hope is definitely a thing, right? I mean, when we talk about people who I've seen people who have given up on hope. I know Amber has seen people
Mm,
who have given up on hope and just being that inspiration. Your story alone, what you've been able to do without even helping anybody directly, like your story alone gives people hope and inspiration. And I'm sure listening to the podcast today, it's going to give people hope and inspiration going forward that people can overcome some really horrible circumstances.
yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I mean, there's good things in the world. They do exist. We're now in our third year, our third cohort. We continue to sort of like refine our model as we move forward. Our three pillars here at Community Spring is income, power, community. People need income to meet their needs, power to change systems, and a community to belong in. And it's cool. Like, we're part of this like sort of national coalition. We've been sought out now by like 35 plus organizations and cities eager to learn from our playbook and like, how can we do something here? Some of those folks are still planning. Some have launched their own guaranteed income programs. It's cool to be a part of it now this year, especially the summer. And we're now in this coming up in summer of 2025, doing a lot of speaking engagements and sharing the results in conjunction with folks who are working on similar things from different parts of the country as well. So it's cool. Like, we're part of like this reentry cash coalition, and hopefully like showing that when people just have like their resources that they need, they do better. And it's actually, not only is this like good from a human perspective, this is actually, it's like fiscally, it's cheaper.
It makes so much like logical, scientific,
Yeah.
social sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a better use of resources. It's a win-win all the way around. Yeah, it's a safer, more stable community. People are happy. You want your neighbor to be happy.
Kevin, there is so many wonderful things about your story. And as Jason already said, it is always our hope that people can be inspired by the bravery of our guests coming on here and sharing their story. And so, my final question to you as we wrap up our time together is, if you had one piece of advice for someone who was on a similar journey to your own, what would that be?
I think all the time. There was one day when I was in prison. I hadn't been there very long. I was in prison, and I guess I had been there maybe like a few months. It was hot as shit. I remember that. Like I said, Florida has no air conditioning. I was just in this cell. My bunkie at the time was somewhere else. I was just in this cell by myself. It felt like I was like in an oven. I remember like looking out the window through the bars at this like piping hot patch of dirt. It was just like beaming, like scorching sun. It was like barren. Nothing could grow. It was just like so fucking hot. And I remember thinking like, I'm never gonna get out of here. I'm gonna I'm gonna fucking die in here. I'm never gonna make it out of this prison. And then also like this sort of haunting thought of maybe you've never not been in here. Maybe like you've always been in this prison. Like sort of like reality started getting really shitty. And I felt like pretty positive. My life is over. There's nothing good will ever happen to me again. Happy that I was so wrong. And so I try to tell people all the time, like, you just don't know. I know things feel so awful right now. Things can feel so discouraging, and it can seem like I can't even envision the path ahead for me. Just stay. You just don't know. Just stick with it. It will not always be like this. There's definitely good things happening in the world. There are good people in the world. Just don't give up on yourself. Just keep staying.
Oh, I really, really love that, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wisdom, all of the things that you're doing. It's very, very exciting. We will make sure that in the notes and everything, all of the information about what you're doing is there for people to look at. Is there a particular contact information that you might want to say audibly, like how people can find you on the internet or reach out to your program?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, our website is definitely the best way to reach us. It is csgnv.org. That's Community Spring, Gainesville. So csgnv.org. And yeah, people can sign up for our newsletter. They can contact us directly through the website. Definitely would love people to follow our work, follow us on social media, all those things, and ways to just keep up with what we have going on.
So thank you, Kevin. When we are going to talk with somebody new, sometimes we know a little bit about their story. We knew a little bit about your work. I was very happy with the way you tell a story. I was with you all the way from your childhood, all the way up to the good work you're doing now. So I appreciate you for coming. And like I said earlier, you inspired me, and I'm sure you're going to inspire others because this is a great story. So thank you for being here. And Amber, until next time.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. For more information, episodes, and podcast notes, visit amplifiedvoices.show.